Tonight, in an I-Team investigation, a Boston nonprofit that serves low-income kids says an interior designer took their money and then never delivered.
After the organization contacted us to help recover the funds, the I-Team's Ryan Kath discovered other victims all over the country.
Welcome to Million Dollar Decorating.
With a name like that, you can understand why a tiny Boston nonprofit thought it hit the jackpot when James Swan offered to help.
He's absolutely charming, very articulate.
But as the organization soon found out, that friendly offer came at a high cost.
The nonprofit serves low-income kids. How do you do something like that?
At all Dorchester Sports, the after-school program had a security need for new exterior lights in 2014.
It's not a safe place once the sun goes down.
Executive Director Candace Gartley met the designer at a community event where he volunteered to do the design work for free and even order the lights at cost.
We operate on the thinnest of financial margins.
That's why it was a big deal to cut a check for more than $13,000. But after months of excuses and delays, there were still no lights.
No one would do this to a nonprofit youth organization. It just couldn't be possible.
But it was. The nonprofit eventually took Swan to court and won. The designer paid half the money back, and then
he dropped off the face of the earth.
When the I-Team contacted Swan, he admitted he owed the money and promised the check is scheduled to be cut and signed this week. That was in April, and when the money never arrived, the I-Team did some digging.
He feels no remorse.
Attorney Peter Brooks represented a Newton family who hired Swan to decorate their home in Chestnut Hill. But they later discovered furniture they paid for was never even ordered.
This was a conscious misappropriation of funds and then the deceit that followed to hide that.
The family sued Swan and won a judgment of more than $211,000. But the designer later filed for bankruptcy and walked away without the family collecting a dime.
I think it probably eats at them every day.
I immediately thought that he was gone. I just had a bad feeling.
Daniel Erickson is owed more than $150,000 after hiring Swan to decorate his Los Angeles home. Even a private investigator couldn't track him down.
He's hiding in plain sight.
Thank you, Katie. It's great to be with you.
And that's what frustrates victims the most. Along with promoting his podcast, Swan frequently posts about his travel to trade shows in Dallas, Vegas, Chicago, even overseas.
Paris was amazing.
But when Swan shared a photo of his boarding pass on the way to California, the I-Team was waiting for him when he touched back down in Portland, Maine.
Do you remember talking to me several months ago when you said you were going to pay back the nonprofit in Dorchester?
I don't know.
Swan tried to get away, but we let him know we'd looked into his background.
You've been doing this for years to people.
We walked through the terminal, across the street, into the elevator.
What happened to all that money?
Trying to give Swan a chance to refresh his memory or explain how he has the funds to travel the world.
Why not scrape the money together to pay back the nonprofit? Like you said you would.
It's still not okay that he's out there doing this. It really bothers me because it affects the kids and the families that I serve here.
Well, tonight we have a positive development to share in an I-Team investigation. This was our confrontation with a designer who ripped off people across the country, including a Dorchester nonprofit that serves low-income children. That nonprofit paid the designer thousands of dollars for work that he simply never did.
But now, after our story, the design industry is rallying to support that tiny organization. The I-Team's Ryan Kath has the update.
The nonprofit serves low-income kids. How do you do something like that?
That's James Swan refusing to answer the I-Team's questions. We told you how the designer offered to help a Dorchester nonprofit install security lighting on the outside of their building.
It's not a safe place once the sun goes down.
But after cutting a check for more than $13,000, Swan never delivered, a devastating blow to a razor-thin budget.
No one would do this to a nonprofit youth organization.
The I-Team found other victims across the country owed hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Welcome to Million Dollar Decorating.
Along with his daily podcast, Swan frequently posts about his travel to different trade shows.
Paris was amazing.
But when the designer shared a photo of his boarding pass, the I-Team was waiting for him when his flight arrived.
Do you remember talking to me several months ago when you said you were going to pay back the nonprofit in Dorchester?
I don't know.
The I-Team followed the $1 million decorator around the airport, but he was suddenly at a loss for words.
Why not scrape the money together to pay back the nonprofit?
After our story, Swan posted an apology on Facebook, but denied any wrongdoing.
No one's responsible for the situation but me. I have paid back half of the debt.
It's like a gut punch. You know, it's embarrassing.
Designers like Linda Merrill watched the story in horror, but she and others in the industry are now rushing to help, launching a GoFundMe page to support the nonprofit.
And we felt there's a lot of us. We could all chip in a little bit and say, we love you.
In less than a day, donations already surpassed the amount Swan took and failed for years to pay back.
I'm not a person who cries, but I got to tell you, I went home last night and I cried. And it was good. It was good crying.
Designers say this is by no means a bailout for Swan, and they still expect him to pay back his debt. Meantime, the company that sponsored the podcast has already pulled its advertising. The co-founder tells me she also donated to the nonprofit.
Tonight, the resolution to an I-Team investigation that makes one local group very happy. A well-known interior designer has finally paid back a Dorchester nonprofit that serves low-income kids.
And the I-Team's Ryan Kath exposed the so-called $1 million decorator for ripping off people across the country.
The nonprofit serves low-income kids. How do you do something like that? By the time the I-Team confronted James Swan at the Portland airport, the interior designer had repeatedly failed to deliver on his promise.
Why not scrape the money together to pay back the nonprofit?
Like you said you would.
Instead, the $1 million decorator had gallivanted around the country promoting his podcast, even traveling overseas to trade shows.
Paris was amazing.
And as the I-Team investigated, we found other victims across the country, from Newton to Los Angeles. You've been doing this for years to people.
4 lights on this side.
The story came to our attention after Swan volunteered to help all Dorchester sports install security lighting on the outside of their building. But after the executive director cut him a check, the designer took the money and disappeared.
No one would do this to a nonprofit youth organization. It just couldn't be possible.
Welcome to $1 Million Decorating.
The I-Team learned the popular podcast has now gone silent after more than 20 designers from around the country sent Swan this cease and desist letter demanding he remove episodes with their interviews. But the nonprofit director and her kids now have thousands of reasons to be thankful.
Oh my God, the love. We're being love bombed.
Horrified by what they saw, designers rushed to support the tiny organization, raising more than $26,000 on a GoFundMe page. And just this week, Swan finally settled his debt by sending a $6,500 check. No longer worried about keeping the lights on, the nonprofit finally has the financial resources to dream bigger.
Never, ever, ever in my wildest dreams would I think that we would be here today. And it was all because of the I-Team.
Swan may have had extra incentives to settle up. The I-Team learned there was an active warrant for his arrest related to the money he took from the nonprofit. Tonight, the designer told me via email that he deeply regrets the mistake and takes full responsibility. Liam, Lisa?
Ryan, good job getting that nonprofit their money. I know he hounded that guy for months, and finally there is a solution there.